Good afternoon, dear colleagues and friends. Let's wait a bit more for the rest of the audience. Meanwhile, we would like to invite you to our web portal webinar-2017, where all the previous recordings of webinars and interviews are stored. In the video section of our main website, there are files and videos from the previous UTIC conferences. In the end of the presentation, you'll see the direct links to both sections. Today, we are glad to welcome Alessandra Martelli, who will tell us about managing finances as a freelancer. Our today's meeting is going to be hosted by me, Stanislav Bogdanov, Chief Operating Officer of the Ukrainian Translation Industry Conference. Let me share some information about Alessandra with you. Alessandra Martelli is an Italian translator and copywriter, trading as MTM Translations. She writes and translates marketing and PR copy, tourism texts, and medical content for small businesses and large corporates alike. Alessandra is also a trainer with a background in teaching and the author of 21 free tools for translators. Feel free to visit her website, mtmtranslations.com, in order to learn more about her and see how she can help. She launched her solo business in 2002 and still enjoys every minute of it. Now it's time for me to turn it over to Alessandra, and before I do that, I want to ask all of our attendees today to send questions in the chat window. I will ask them in the end of the presentation. So, Alessandra, you can have the mic right now.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you, Stanislav, for introducing me so graciously and for your support throughout the webinar. So I can see people are coming in, so let's get started. What I'd like to talk to you today through is managing your finances, because as much as we all say that our work comes from a passion or deeply rooted interest in languages and all of that sort of, things that we feel because we actually ran into translation or freelancing in general, it's true, but it's also true that in the end, we're all in it for the money. So the financial side of translation is actually something that's pretty important to keep an eye on. And many freelancers, unfortunately, still underestimate the importance of this. But since we want to be all happy and wealthy and run a decent living, whatever a decent living might mean to each and one of us, there are things we can do in the background to ensure that our freelance income actually caters for our needs. And also we need to take into account that our work as freelancers is on an on-call basis, so we might need to manage a fluctuating income, especially in the early stages of your career. So today we're tackling three main areas of happy financial management, as I'd like to call it, and I hope it will be so for you. So we first start with pricing and budgeting, because you know that you actually have to make ends meet with what you charge for your services. Then we'll go through how to protect our work and our hard-earned money with thoughtful customer relationships. So things we can do with clients, or we can offer the client in order to protect our work from the beginning to the end. And in the third part, I'd like to share with you some really down-to-earth, common sense cash flow management tips that will help you. And these can sound right, we all know these things, but many of us still forget us, so I'm going to share them with you along with my own whys. One small disclaimer before we start: I'm not a finances expert. This is not financial advice. I just want to share with you things that worked for me as a freelancer and some best practices that I learned along the way. So let's go start with, the first section, which is about pricing. And sustainable pricing, to me, means prices that actually support your life and well-being as a person and a business owner. And determining prices is not easy, especially in our industry, but it all starts with understanding what your income needs are. One question we read a lot in translation fora, in Facebook groups, etc., goes along the lines of, how much should I charge for this project? How much can I ask my customer for this task? Well, the way I see it, sustainable pricing starts with asking ourselves a different question, which is, how much do I need to charge to earn myself a decent living? And again, the definition of what a good income is and what a decent living is individual. It depends on your own situation, your economical environment. We all know that. But you need to come up with a way that helps you determine prices that work for you. And one thing I think it's important, there are different income levels. We all have a survival income level, which is a sum of money that caters for our basic life needs, so food, drinks, house, and to keep our business going, so fixed business costs, registrations, overheads, and taxes. And if your income level is at that point, you only get by and survive. So this is not something you should aim for, but of course, your pricing should be able to cover that. Then that's what I call a minimum income, which is your survival income plus the costs related to your own current standard of living. So housing, insurance, and sports classes for kids, holidays, whatever you do normally, and the related costs that it brings us. So a minimum income level caters for your survival and keeping up with your current standard of limits. And of course, this minimum income, since we are talking about, freelancing and managing a business, also needs to cover, based on my experience, your business costs. So the tools you use, your marketing materials, subscriptions to associations, memberships, any kind of that costs, right from, the leisure shopping at the fancy mall for some extra dress, to up to paying your memberships on professional associations if you belong to an association. And then there is what we should all aim for, which is a target income, which covers all of your living expenses for your standard lifestyle and cost of living, and brings you in profits. And since we are business owners, even though our businesses are not as large and structured as companies or whatever, profits should be actually our goal. So earning enough not just to get by and keep up with our leisure expenses, but also bringing in more money that you can use for savings, for other business activities, so to invest in your business, for your CPD, so to invest in yourself and your business, or just for more holidays or for rainy days. But our aim as freelancers should be to cover all the expenses and make some profit. So how do you get there? It starts with, understanding how your working hours go. We all work awful amounts of hours in a week, but most of that time is actually non-billable time. So time we devote to our work, to our customers, to our marketing, to our blogging, social media, and you name it, IT, training, when you learn about a new tool, that is all the time you invest in your work and you cannot be paid for. And your billable hours, which are the hours you spend on actually paid work and directly related activities. So actually your prices should cater both for the translation, the writing, the editing you do, and the overhead of managing a project with a customer. So once you understand that, you need to do some maths. So you take your target income after doing some calculations to consider how much you invest every month or every year on your own business and personal expenses. Add the profit, and the percentage of the profit you want to make is, again, individual. Some people might strive for 10% of profit, 20%, it's up to you. But once you define that, and you define that by calculating your expenses and deciding on a percentage of profits, you divide that amount by your billable hours, and you actually come up with the hourly rate you should charge to achieve your target income, including the amounts of profits. Now, you see on the slide that there is a nice blue and purple sun. This is not just for decoration. It actually means that in the handout that Stanislav will send after the webinar, you will find a resource, actually two in this case, that will help you to do these maths. So starting with your expenses, coming up with your starting hourly rate. It's an online tool. All of the tools I'm mentioning are free, so you can choose either or do it all by yourself. It's not, it will take you some time, but it's not undoable if you'd rather go for your good old pen and paper. So this is, in my idea, sustainable pricing, starting with your own needs and desires and figuring out how much you should charge for that. And of course, if you are in a family, you need to calculate what the percentage of the expenses that actually are on you and what are the expenses are covered by the other people living with you. But again, this is a method, and you can use it, of course, adapting it to your own personal situation. Another thing I consider strongly when looking for sustainable pricing is actually doing another little bit of calculation. So establish what your rock bottom rate is, in this case, an hourly rate. And how do you do that? You actually calculate your minimum income needs. So the second column we saw before, the one with the survival plus your standard of living, and dividing that total amount by the billable hours. Again, why should you establish this rock bottom rate? To me, it's quite self-explanatory. The difference between the rock bottom rate and the standard rate, the physical divide, so how much money, let's say your rock bottom rate is 30 and your standard rate is 45, as an example. Then you have a range for discounts, reductions, and anything in between. It would be great if we could all, work day in, day out with a standard rate, but we all know that this is not the case. What's important is to understand that you need to put a limit on discounts and reductions. And that's what your rock bottom rate is used for. So if you charge your standard rate or higher for premium rates, then you're actually catering for that share of profits that you actually set in your calculations. If you charge between your rock bottom rate and your standard rate, you're still catering for your current standards of living, so that's good, that's okay. You're losing on part of the profits, depending on, where does the ticker actually stands. But it's also important to know that if you charge below your rock bottom rate, it actually means that you're losing on your standard of living. So if you keep charging below the rock bottom rate at the end of the year, you will have to cut out some of the expenses you're actually sustaining. And we all know that expenses, personal and business, always go up. So it's good to have something solid, something fixed, such as a price, a rock bottom rate, to watch out for and use as, an indicator of how is our pricing strategy doing compared to our own income needs, etc. And once you have these and your income needs, it's also very simple to budget accordingly, to put something in the line that helps you figure out how much money will I need next year for the IT, when you know that on average you invest 100 or 200 or 300 in IT, then you know that next year you will probably need that. If you have lots of subscriptions for social media, memberships, etc., and you know that they sum up to a certain amount, then it's much easier to budget for the following year and so on. But it all starts with good maths, common sense, and your house bills, because you need to do some calculations. Standard rates in terms of market rates, etc., are an indicator, but you need to come up with the pricing that works for you. And if it's higher than the standard market rate or something, if there is anything such as in translation, which I surely doubt about, because we all have different kinds and ranges of prices for different services, then you need to make sure that your service is actually worth the higher price. This was for section 1, and I hope everything is clear so far. If there are questions, just pop them out in the chat and Stanislaw will kindly read them through for me at the end of the session. The second section, as I was mentioning earlier, is about what we do with our customers or towards our customers to protect our income. And this is something that we might not think of as part of financial management per se, because it doesn't have to do with numbers and figures and prices, but it has to do with protecting your money, your work, and ultimately your assets. And these actions and measures we can implement to keep our wallets safe has to do both with pre-sales and post-sales operations. So things you do before you actually start working on a translation, and something that you do after that. Now, for pre-sales actions, these can be summed up in 4 big elements. And first is background checks. When you first get an email for a new customer, it is absolutely normal and natural to just jump at the opportunity, send a price, and that's it. But we all know that there might be problems. Not making background checks can cause you a financial loss, because you might be actually working for someone who is not then be willing to pay in general, not just because it is you. And you might also incur in frauds and scams. So it's important to check the person you're talking to before you actually accept a project, and before going through the hassle of managing such things. And we all know that non-payment issues are a thing. Fortunately, we have lots of resources, and again, thanks to the Blue Sun, you will have some links and resources you can check online for free for 4, or rather, 2 divided by 4 big areas. First area is the identity. We all know that identity theft is a thing, and we all know that checking whether the business you are contacting or dealing with is legitimate. So you need to check whether they are who they claim to be. And the other big thing is solvency alongside business reputation. Now, there are lots of practical things you can do. For starters, check out the physical address in Google. You need to check out Melissa for IP locations. But you also have, as business people, huge advantages, at least in most countries, which are the chambers of commerce and commerce watchguard offices and services, so to call them. So you will find in the handout a link to a database that includes contact links to 160 chamber of commerces and company information registers in the world, that will make it easy for you, if you don't know, if the company you're talking to is not local, to find some company information for free, even if it's in another country. So start with good background checks. And we all know that it's not nice to question other people's, willingness to be fair right in advance, but better safe than sorry in this case. To take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it takes, but do check about new clients. Another thing we do in terms of money protection with customers is always provide a terms and conditions document and have it signed in writing. You need to make sure that the people you are working with understand that your service is actually real, and you're a service provider, not a pro bono worker. So your terms and conditions both serve as a protection for you and the client. Most importantly, in the areas of money management and protection, your terms and conditions should always include your payment terms, your late payment policy and fees. And I know that some of you don't have them, but as a business, you are actually entitled to establish late payment policies and enforce them when needed. Of course, the requirements depend on where you live, so don't do it by yourself, but ask to your accountant. And again, another good thing for finances management is actually work with a professional accountant, someone that helps you with understanding where your money goes and how much should go where. So that's another good thing to keep in mind. But late payment policies are a thing in the EU. They are harmonized, so you might check the regulations, but all countries have different requirements. So again, go for official sources when looking for this. Your terms and conditions document can also include guidelines about deposits and upfront payments. And that is something I would encourage you to, especially with direct customers, because direct customers tend to accept that more easily than LSPs. Ask for a deposit that will minimize your loss in case of non-payment issues later. And it also serves you as a way to see quickly if someone is actually willing to pay or not. Again, you're entitled to ask for deposits, and by all means, I would encourage you to do that in case of large projects. Another thing to put down in writing alongside with terms and conditions is, of course, a project confirmation of sorts, either a purchase order or a signed quote. And another thing you can do, the last one, I would say in the pre-sales stage, is actually set credit limits. And what do I mean? If you work a lot with a company and you do tons of translations for them every month and you invoice them monthly, then you are, of course, used to the fact that they will pay. But there are times where you work for quite a large amount of time and then you don't have very convenient payment terms in terms of days after invoice. So one thing you can do, and you have to do it before you actually start working with a client, and that is something you can also put on your terms and conditions document, is a credit limit. So say, I will invoice you at the end of the month up to, let's say, 2,000 euros. If you reach the 2,000 euro limits before, then I will invoice for that first 2,000 euros, and that goes on. And then at the end of the month, I will just make another invoice for the remainder. This is good because it helps you harmonize your cash flow. If you know that you have credit limits, you won't have to wait for bulky invoices to come up later and squeeze your cents in the meantime. But you have an option to get sort of a regular cash flow, incoming cash flow. This for, things you can do before you start. And again, I won't stress ever enough the importance of these elements, because these are just like building a solid foundation for a good working relationship with a client, and a solid foundation for minimizing the business risks involved with working with people you don't know yet. So keep an eye on them. For post-sales, well, I say that most of it goes with invoicing well. And what do I mean by well? I mean, first of all, invoice regularly. So don't push aside your paperwork. if it's a one-shot project for an unknown client, send the invoice right with the delivery fund, with the deliverables of your project, and ask for confirmation. And if people actually receive the project, they cannot receive half an email. So they cannot receive the project but not the invoice. And this helps with, reducing the number of unnecessary follow-ups with people. And also in your invoicing, you should always recap your payment terms and methods. And speaking of payment methods, I think it's really important to accept safe and certified payment methods only. So bank accounts, PayPal or Skrill or whatever, some peer-to-peer money transfer services are also good. But you should also keep an eye on the hidden costs. It occurred to me while I was searching for accounting and invoicing tools for my ebook to check tons of these invoicing and money collection websites and services, just to find out that yes, the tool was free in case you used the money collection services. You had to pay a percentage of your invoice plus the transaction. And I have seen shares for the service up to 20% and not kept. So if you sign up for an online invoicing and money collection tool, check out their terms, their sales, and of course, all transaction costs. Because we all know that bank transfer, especially if it's international, is costly. We all know that all these services actually cost money, but it's much better to go with a large or largish fee that rather than incurring in hidden costs and fees once you have signed up, subscribed, or whatever. So do accept only safe payment methods and register things that you can certify, no cash. And of course, it's okay if you're doing a one-off job for your neighbor who needs to translate their one single page on Facebook. But for business-to-business transactions, always go for registered methods and always check the costs. And the last thing that goes along with invoicing is to ensure that you get paid, is to monitor and follow up on your invoicing regularly. One thing you can do that really helped me actually keep track of the invoices and due dates and whatever, is to actually use an accounting software. That really helps. And again, in the handout, you will find a link to a free accounting software you can use. So if you don't have another favorite options, you can check it out. But most importantly, using accounting software also helps you with reconciliations, tax calculations, and if you share the accounting software with your accountant, they can check whether your bills are okay. And most accounting software also have features for tracking expenses, reconciliation of bank accounts, and things like that. That will help you keep an eye on your money. So these things, again, these are everyday things, but these are also the things that are mostly overlooked by people. So it's important to keep them together. Now, almost the end. And if you have questions, again, just pop them in. I know I'm going through this fairly quickly, but I don't want to keep too much of your working afternoon for me, even though it's a pleasure. So we'll go with the last but not least, cash flow management tips. And these are, again, things that can make a big difference, even if it's just a small few steps. And first thing I would encourage you to do is to set up an emergency fund, because we all know that problems happen, payment delays happen, and all sorts of things. Life gets in the way all the time. So it's good when you're a solo business to actually have some money you can reach in case of emergency, an emergency only. Calculating that we actually live, most of us, on a fluctuating income, I would encourage you to consider your minimum emergency fund in terms of 3 or 4 months of all your bills paid, your rent paid, and all the minimum income apart catered for 3 or 4 months. If you don't have that kind of sum yet, start an emergency fund with what you have and then build on it until you get your target amount, and then forget about it, unless, of course, you have an emergency. Another thing that works well with keeping up with your money and making sure that you do not spend more than you have is to separate business money and personal money. I have seen this tip around a lot too, from different sources. And most people say you should have 4 or 5 separate bank accounts. Now, even though that is possible, and in most cases it's doable, consider that opening multiple bank accounts also mean you amplify your financial management costs, because each bank account, each financial solution will have returning costs. So to minimize those costs, what I can suggest to you is to actually have one account for the cash flow, so money you are free to spend every month or whatever, and one business account where you leave the amount for taxes and overheads. So what you do, you have your business account where money comes in, you move just a part of the money to the personal account and the account you can spend, and keep your taxes money beforehand on your business account. I know that tax shares and rates and percentages vary by country. That is okay, but you know how much you have to pay in taxes. So what I can suggest you to do at the end of each month, calculate how much money came in and just leave the percentage that you need for the taxes and overheads on the business account, and move to your personal account only the money you can actually spend. So when the tax season comes in, you don't need to worry, because you already have the kind of money you need on your business account. And of course, you should have, in my opinion, a savings account. To minimize the costs, you can actually merge the emergency fund and savings. And there is a very simple way to do this, which is actually mark on pen and paper on your accounting software or whatever, how much the emergency fund accounts to. So you start calculating the savings from that amount up. So if your emergency fund is 2,000 and your total savings account is 4,060, then you know that you actually have 2,060 in savings and 2,000 on your emergency fund. In my experience, there is no need to separate the emergency fund and the savings. It just takes a little self-discipline and a piece of paper where you need to divide the total amount. Another thing, of course, for rational cash flow management is to keep track of your expenses. And this goes along with, of course, setting up budgets for your expenses. When you're starting out, it's difficult to actually understand how much of your money goes into business expenses, how much goes into this and this and this. So you kind of figure it out. You make a ballpark figure, or you try to calculate based on the previous years. But if you keep track of your expenses, and there is an expense tracker app in the handout that you can try. If you track them, you also learn how to manage them more easily. If watching your money becomes a habit, then you also have a better understanding of what happens in your wallets and in your bank accounts. And it becomes easier, because if you build an habit around, tracking, monitoring, following up, it becomes much easier. Don't put things aside, but just don't overdo it. Don't become a maniac for tracking, because it wastes a large amount of time. If you try constantly to, tracking better and better and better, decide on a simple method that works for you and stick to that. Do track, but with some, salt in it. So do not atomize your tracking amongst 4 or 5 different software tools. Pick one method, one tool, and stick to it. Another thing you can do to harmonize a bit your cash flow is to ask for payment installments for long-term projects. This goes hand in hand with, setting credit limits. It doesn't have to follow the same rule, but if you have a, 10,000 euro project that goes from January to June, then you can agree with the customer that they will send you part of the money on February, some in April, and then the rest in June. So you don't have to wait too long for long-term projects. And that happens a lot when you start working with clients. They are happy with you. You might have, 6 months, 8 months projects, but you need to make sure that you get paid regularly and constantly as much as possible. So go for payment installments for bulky invoices. And last but not least, once again, figure out a budget for business costs. This can include CPD, IT, so tools you need to update, subscribe to, buy, materials, travel expenses for conferences, for meetings, for whatever. Figure out a budget and stick to it as much as possible. I have seen many colleagues saying, I'd like to do that course, but I don't have money for that. And then later on, they actually realized that they had invested all of their budget in 3 conferences and they don't have money left for the course. It happens more often than not in almost any business at any stage, from the freelancer to the big company. But budgeting is essential, understanding that you cannot go further than that helps you avoiding debt. And credit card debt is a harsh reality to many people, and it can be very cumbersome. So try to budget as much as possible. And again, if you're just starting out, you don't have to go maniac about the budget being okay, but go for a cautelative, precautionary budget that you know you can afford. And the following year, you will adjust based on what you actually earn. But budgeting and, again, keeping an eye on things is, of course, essential. Okay, I hope you're still scribbling on your notes. I think we're almost set. So if you have any questions,
thank you, Alessandra, for expanding this topic. Let me now ask some questions from our audience.
Okay.
The first one is, in the first part of the presentation, you are analyzing rates on the basis of, for example, your individual needs. What about market research? In other words, how to charge decent rate and stay competitive among other freelancers?
That is a good question. I do think that there are different markets, and different markets have different rates. We all know that in our industry, we have a large portion of low rates, let's say like that. But I don't like, going for low rates, because the concept of low rate is absolutely individual. I mean, for me, I live in a country where over 40% of my rates go into taxes. So I cannot charge the same price a person with a 20% share of taxes can charge, because otherwise I will lose. Competition based on prices is not the best thing. And I know that market rates are a thing, so you indeed need to make market research and understand what an average or a trend or a range is customary for your language combinations, your specialties, etc. If you find, based on your needs, that your average hourly rate is much higher than the normal rate, then one good solution would be to specialize and offer a specialized service which is worth the higher price. Or you can actually include some extra services that don't take you much time, such as, I don't know, creating a glossary or sharing a resource for the client, things that don't cost you too much time because you're already doing it, but just highlight them. If you do the translation and you put the glossary in and then you do the proofreading, or you ask your client for proofreading, but you don't say that to the customer doesn't see the added value. So if you do these sort of things, use them to your advantage to justify, even though I don't like the word justifying for rates. Staying competitive on markets is good and bad, because staying competitive also means that when prices on average go down, you need to go down. But there is just so much that you can do to, lower your price, and you can't work for free. If you want to stay competitive based on your needs, you might want to start smaller and decide on a small percentage of profits, but you need to make sure that your price and your rates pay you off for your daily living, because otherwise you will stay competitive for 1 year, for 2 years, and then you will just close because you cannot afford running a business, because you don't have the time, it doesn't pay you enough. So if you think that you're starting out and your price is already higher, go for a smaller share of profits. Cut down your unbillable hours, as an example, using automation, using services that can help you do the things you don't get paid for more quickly, and make more time for work, but not more time in terms of now I will sleep only 4 hours. If you work 10 hours a day, and we all know that the average freelancer spends between 12 and 13 hours a day in work, but only 40% of that is billable, because you have all the overhead and the marketing. So using automation, trying to reduce the amount of unbillable hours, and making time for paid work besides the overhead in a smart way, not by working more and more hours, because otherwise the productivity will go down anyway. So staying competitive is, I don't know if it's the right thing. Or you can, example, start working with companies in different countries where the rates are higher compared to your standard of living. If you work for into German, into Italian, as an example, such as I do, I actually work for German clients. Mm-hmm. German clients pay higher rates. So there is a way to get the rates you want. You have, of course, first thing first, you have to provide an excellent services and prove that you're worth the higher price. But you shouldn't sacrifice your living for staying competitive, because otherwise it's a short-term game and the losing game in the long run. At least that's what I have seen with colleagues and 15 years of business. If you go always for the lowest price you can strive, then it's not sustainable in the long run.
Okay.
I know it's not probably very encouraging to say this, but that's true, at least based on my experience. I have seen many colleagues just saying, I need to find another job because, I can't make enough out of translation. And that is something sad, because when you're a freelancer, you invest so much time and effort and dedication to that closing up just because you're not charging enough is not good.
By the way, do you have success stories about switching from minimum to the target rate with the same customer? About raising the rate with the same customer?
Okay, what I do with my customers is actually updating my rates every 2 years, and they know it. And they know it in advance, because when we first started working together, I said, okay, these are my rates for, let's say, 2010, 2011. So they already knew that in 2011, there will have been a raise. In my experience, this is much better than waiting 5 or 6 years and then having to, going up with a large amount. So a small adjustment every 2 years is what I do. And one thing that happens when you raise your rate is that some clients walk away. It's a reality. It's something that happens all the time. And there is nothing wrong with it. It's just common nature. Some clients would go with other people, and that is why you should actually market your services constantly and finding new clients. Also because when you find a new client, you can actually agree on the higher rate right from the start. What I built is actually some kind of ladder. And now I don't have a slide for that, so we'll try to explain that. Let's say that for 2011, the price was 10. 2010, 2011. For 2012, 2013, that will be maybe 11. So what do? You start offering 11 to the clients you meet in 2012 as the standard rate, and you upgrade the others. So you actually build upon your portfolio of clients, keeping the rates harmonized. Another thing you can do, if you know that you're going to actually raise your price in 2018, is for your existing clients, is actually try to agree on the rate for 2018 with clients you meet in 2017. So you have in 2017 part of your customers that will pay the standard rate for the year, and clients that will pay the higher rate 1 year earlier. Of course, we all know that regular clients have some kind of benefits in terms of reductions, in terms of how much time you put into finishing up the source text they sent, which is full of typos, etc. So it's good to keep your existing clients at a slightly lower price level compared to one-off clients, because it pays off. But the best thing to do is to actually decide on how frequently you will rediscuss the rates beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Thank you for the answer. Alessandra, could you please tell us, you told us about the software you use for invoicing. Do you use any software for project management? Do you have freelancers working with you, or editors or proofreaders? And does this project management software, if you use, allow to automatically or semi-automatically invoice your clients?
I do not use project management tool. I do work with proofreaders, sometimes for direct clients. I do work with designers for my copywriting, but actually I only manage my own projects. So I do not, I'm trained as a secretary, so I'm pretty used to do the invoicing with an accounting software, but I don't use project management software. I think that there was a book by Rui Souza that was about project management for translators, and in the book he shares some project management software, but I do not use any. If you want, I know I can ask around if other colleagues I know use project management tools, but I'm not really sure about that. So I'm afraid I'm not the best person to answer about project management tools, but you might want to check, how was it? I'm trying to remember the name of the colleague's website. Mine's something like that. Rui Souza, and you will find this book, and it is all about project management. So
okay, thank you. We'll Google it. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Alessandra, could you also tell us what tool do you use to track your payments from clients. Will the link be in the handout?
I do use an accounting software, and you have the link in the handout. I actually set up then reminders in a diary tool, in a time management tool. So my daily to-dos, I do set up reminders for following up in a tool. I don't have any special tool for that, but there is a reminders function in the accounting tool I use as well. But since I tend to forget things, I write them both in the accounting software that puts up reminders automatically, and in my to-do lists and planners.
Okay, thank you. And tell us one more answer, please, for the question, which is about planning your emergency fund. Emergency fund. You stated that we can store the emergency fund along with the savings account.
Yeah.
What if the savings account will be on a deposit or term deposit, and liquidity will be limited, liquidity of this emergency fund? Or should we always have our emergency fund handy in case we need it?
Okay, that is actually a good question, because some people tend to, put their emergency fund in a limited access or limited liquidity account for safety. I do think that if an emergency strikes, having limited access to your emergency fund is not a good idea. So I only keep an account, a normal bank account for the emergency fund and savings, but I do keep it open. I know because I actually, divide the sum between the emergency and do whatever you want with this money parts of the amount. But I do not think that having limited access to your emergency fund is a good thing. Of course, emergencies might not need access to the emergency fund, and if you can, use the savings. But the way I see it, I don't think it's a good idea to put them in a limited liquidity account. But that is just my own idea. I know that people have, of course, you differentiate your savings and investments, but the sum you put as an emergency should be there, available when you need it. So I don't know if that helps. I'm not a banking specialist, but I do think that you can diversify your savings and investments, but keep the emergency fund handy, etc. Of course, handy means you have to put it there and forget it until emergency strikes, but don't close him behind, a deposit or a long-term investment, because that wouldn't serve the case when you need it.
Thank you very much for your advice. I'm a former banking specialist, so I can say that this advice is very good, and I'm sure that this advice will become handy to our viewers and attendees. Alessandra, could you please tell us, talking about a business account, do you suggest using a multi-currency account or investing on getting payments from clients in one particular currency?
I think it really depends on the conditions that the bank offers you. So there are different banks with different options. I do usually, I have an account in euro. My main business account is in euro. I do, when I have payments from the US, as an example, which are in dollars, I just ask my clients to send it via PayPal instead. but that is my way, because my bank doesn't offer very convenient multiple currency accounts now. But other banks might have other, you know, facilitations for businesses. Do check, regardless of your bank and your country, do check with your bank if they have special accounts for business and if there are facilitations for that. But I cannot one way or the other, because it really depends by institution, and even within the same country, different institutions and banks have different conditions, so I cannot really recommend that. I don't really I can't advise on that. But what I do is actually keep one currency account in the bank and divert the foreign currency accounts to PayPal, but that works for me. It's not sure that it will work for everyone.
Yeah, I see. The answer is country specific and band specific for every attendee, for every viewer.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is, could you please tell us how do you usually determine the amount of deposit with clients? In case of, for example, you told us about large projects, and you told us that you are entitled to ask for deposit with client. How do you determine the exact amount?
I do ask for 50% of the project. So I don't determine the amount. With new clients, I ask for 50% advance payment and 50% at the end of the project.
Thank you very much, Alessandra.
The best way would be to, determine a percentage or a share. I have seen other translators, freelancers in general, charge for deposits and advance payments from 30 to 50%. Some people even ask for total payment in advance for the first job. I don't like that, but that is, again, a personal choice. I'd rather go with half now and half when I deliver, or when the invoice is due.
Okay, thank you very much. Alessandra, thank you very much for answering the questions. I think that if our attendees will have additional questions, feel free to share it with us on Facebook or send them in your emails. We will ask Alessandra to answer and publish answers on Facebook or answer to you by email in your private message.
Yep, no problem. If you have any questions, and just share it, and I will be happy to help when I can. Again, as I said before, I cannot give individual financial advice, but I am happy to answer general questions for you. Okay.
Thank you very much for sharing your valuable experience. Dear colleagues. Thank you. Yeah. Dear colleagues, now you can see the links which I've been telling you about in the very beginning. Feel free to visit our resources and continue enjoying our materials. To stay in touch with the UTIC, please be invited to our conference page on Facebook and the UTIC Conf group in Vkontakte if you speak Russian or Ukrainian. Here are the links to English and Russian-speaking communities in the social media. Now, in the chat window, you can see the feedback link. Please follow it to share your opinion on this webinar with us. We strive to perfection, and your thoughts are highly appreciated. We would like to say thank you to the sponsors of UTICamp 2016 conference for their support. And again, our big thanks to Alessandra as our speaker today. Stay tuned and follow us on Facebook page. Thank you very much for being with us. See you soon. Bye.